It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today we're going to cover pfSense. Now, I took a poll a while back and I asked you guys to choose between OpenSense and pfSense, but I think I'll do both. I am going to start with pfSense. I had a few more votes for that, but I want to go through the download and the installation in this first part, and then we'll go through actually doing a little bit of configuration and getting it up and running and assigning some interfaces and things like that in the second part. In order to make this easier to record, I'm going to go ahead and do the installation through Proxmox just because I can record the terminal screen a lot better for the installation part, and then we'll switch over to an actual physical machine when we get into the Web GUI and everything like that to kind of show you how those things work. So we'll get into that install right after this. I want to say thank you to all of my patrons over at Patreon and my subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much for all of your support. I love doing this channel. I love making this media and this content for you. I hope you enjoy it as well. I do post all of the videos now over at Patreon after one of my patrons made the suggestion, and I don't know why it didn't dawn on me before that. But if you're interested in seeing them through Patreon and getting a notification through Patreon instead of through YouTube, or hoping that YouTube's algorithms happens to show it to you, jump over and become a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com. I've got the links in the description and the show notes. I appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Okay, one of the first things you need to do whenever you want to install pfSense or anything else really is go and get an image that you can actually use. So with pfSense, they have a nice downloads page here, but you do have to kind of look at this and see what you want to do. So you've got a few options here, and I'm going to make this just a little bit larger for you guys that are on the phones, but you'll see it's version 2.5.2 and then the architecture that you want. So they have a couple. They have AMD 64, which means you're just going to use like a 64-bit machine with a NIC card in it that maybe has multiple NICs. And you definitely want multiple NICs if you're going to run this thing, because you want incoming and outgoing, and you want to separate those NICs. And if you can have more than that, you can set up VLANs and all kinds of stuff off the other NICs and stuff like that. But for now, we're going to use AMD 64 is what we need. But if you have a Netgate system, then you would obviously download the Netgate version. So we're going to pick AMD 64. The next thing you want to do is the installer type. So if you want the USB memory stick installer or the DVD image installer, you'll want to pick the right one for that. So I'm just going to use a USB memory stick installer. And then they have this last one that pops up, and there's this odd kind of selection here, which is serial or VGA. If you don't know which one to use, you probably want VGA. So pick that, and then pick a download location, and you can see several that are close to you. I'm going to pick Austin, Texas here, and I'm going to hit download. And you'll see it pops up with this little option here. It's going to download this image.gz, which works really well with something like Balena Etcher. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And you'll see up here it's going to start downloading. And it goes pretty fast. So I mean, it doesn't take very long to download that guy. So once you've got that, you need to actually burn that to a USB device. So I've got a USB device that I'm actually going to utilize here. So I'm going to open up Balena Etcher. I'm going to move it over here for you guys. And the first thing you want to do is choose the file, which is the one we just downloaded. So I'm going to go over to my downloads folder here. And you'll see I've got a couple of versions of pfSense. I just re-downloaded it for you guys, but we can just pick this one here. I'm going to go ahead and select the USB device that I want. Now, if you have multiple USB devices plugged in, you're definitely going to want to make sure you select the right one. In this case, I've only got one, so I'm going to go ahead and hit select. And then I'm going to click flash. Now, depending on your operating system, if you're doing this from Windows, it may not prompt you for the password, but on Mac and Linux, it's going to prompt you for your super user password before it starts flashing your device. Now you can see it goes through a decompression here. So it's going to decompress that image file. It's going to start flashing that image. So it's pretty well compressed. This will take a few minutes, and then I'll be back when it's done. All right, that finished up. So we're just going to close out Etcher here. Now, I'm going to upload this to Proxmox. You could just go get it from the URL if you can just get the direct download URL, but I'm going to grab this from, I'm just going to upload this real quick. So, all right, I'm going to start this up, and we'll go through the installation here. So I canceled that, and we'll go to number 1, which is boot multi-user. We'll use that here in just a minute, but it also has 2, which is boot single user. And this is kind of like safe mode, and then you have escape to the loader prompt, reboot, connections of serial type, kernel, and boot options if you need them. So we're looking at the boot options right now. So we're just going to do number 1. So if you just hit 1, it'll kick off that boot option. It's going to run through some system checks real quick. Now you'll come to this page and you can use your page up and page down keys basically to read this. So if you just page down, once you've read everything, if you're good with it, just hit the A for accept and it'll continue. On this screen, you want to select Install pfSense. This is pretty much your options. Now, if you're trying to recover from a crash and you've exported your config.xml, which you should, export it and save it on some other device, and do so regularly when you're making changes. Make sure you do that each time. It makes it a lot easier to bring this back up because you can say recover from config.xml and then point it to that config and it'll bring everything up the way you had it before. There is the rescue shell, so if you're trying to do a rescue from the system that's already running, you could also launch that. For now, we want to do install, and we're going to make sure that's highlighted. Then we're going to hit enter for OK. Here they want you to pick the key map. So if you need a different key mapping, you can just arrow down until the one you want is highlighted and then hit enter to select it. In this case, I want to continue with the default key map, so I'm just going to say select. Now here it wants you to say, how do you want to partition your disk? ZFS is fine if you're comfortable with ZFS, but they also have UFS BIOS and UFS UEFI. It's kind of up to you which one of those you pick. I'm just going to pick regular BIOS at this point, but you can also do manual partitioning if you prefer, or you can open up a shell and do partitioning by hand that way. I'm just going to pick BIOS. It's going to initialize some file systems and do a few things here. Now this is doing this all on a virtual disk that I've created inside of Proxmox, but in reality you would have to choose the disk, and it comes up with a disk chooser if you have multiple disks that it finds, and a lot of times it finds your USB drive that you're running the installer off of. So just kind of pay attention to the size of those disks when you're looking at that option and make sure it's got the right one set to have the installation done. Alright, when it finishes, it'll tell you that the installation is now done, and before exiting the installer, it's going to ask, do you want to go to the shell to make any changes from the shell first? Generally, you'll say no, but if you do have something you need to do in the shell and you know that, you can just tab to change it to yes and then hit enter. In my case, I'm just going to say no, there's nothing I need to change right now. Now it's going to say the installation of pfSense is complete. Would you like to reboot? And you give one more chance to go to the shell if you need to, but in our case, we just want to reboot. You'll see that in the reboot, you get the same option and it counts down and starts on its own into multi-user mode. So here we get the message that pfSense cannot continue without at least one network interface card. So it's basically going to shut itself down. Just be aware that you can't really do anything without a network card for pfSense. So you do need to have that installed. In this case, I didn't set one up with the Proxmox system because we're going to use the other physical system that I've got for the rest of the tutorial on just getting things kind of set up and running and ready to go. And again, I'm not going to do a super in-depth tutorial on things in on things in pfSense. If you're interested in certain topics or something you'd like to know that I can potentially either learn and tell you about, or maybe I already know it and I can tell you more about it, let me know in the comments or jump over to discuss.opensourceisawesome.com and sign in there and just start a thread in one of the channels. And be happy to have a conversation with you when I have time and kind of figure out what you're trying to accomplish and what we can do. There's a lot of other really smart people that join into the discussions there, and they can help out as well. So if you guys need any help, that's a really great place to go. I'm going to switch over to the physical system here in just a minute, and then we'll get back on this. Alright, I want to show you what I'm working with here. So I've got a PC and it's got a single NIC port that's built in, and then I've got a card in it with 4 NICs, and these are all gigabit NIC ports. So I'll be setting these up for the pfSense install that we're doing, and then later when I do OpenSense, I'll do the same thing. So it's actually got 5 NIC ports that we'll have to assign once I get everything ready. But this is just an HP that I got online. It's nothing really special, just a real simple system that I can run and basically put pfSense on. Now, when you do the install on Proxmox, you don't get this prompt, but here it's asking, do I want to install in the entire disk? So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And it's going to let me know, like, hey, we're going to destroy everything on the disk. Are you sure you want to do this? So I'm just going to hit enter again for yes. It's going to come up and prompt me for how I want to partition it and which disk it should be. So for me, the MBR is fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept that. That's what it just defaulted to. And then here it's going to show you, and this is where I was talking about earlier, that you need to know which disk it is you're putting what on, so you need to know the size of your disks to be able to tell kind of where you're wanting to put this. Generally, the default comes out correctly, but you might want to just double check to make sure everything's good. So once you're happy with everything, just go ahead and hit enter. And then you want to make sure that commit is selected when you're ready to go, and just hit enter again. Alright, so once it reboots after doing the installation, this is the menu you're generally going to be prompted with. It may ask you before it gets to this stage about setting up VLANs. If it does, you can make that decision there, but you can also do it from here on the menu. So the first thing we need to do is actually kind of look at the interfaces that it detected here. So you can see it detected a couple of interfaces here, and we need to go set up our interfaces. And if you want to use more than that, you can. So remember, I've got 5. I've got the onboard NIC plus the extra card that's got 4 more gigabit NICs on it. So for me, I want to set up the onboard NIC as the WAN. You don't have to do it this way. Just know that you can set up just using the PCIe card that you set up if you want to, or if you add separate NICs or anything to a desktop machine, you can do that. I'm just going to set up the onboard NIC as the WAN, and then one of the PCIe NICs as the LAN, and then you can set up OPT1, OPT2, and you can rename them, do whatever you want for VLANs or other things like that. But for me, I'm going to use that for the LAN. So I want to go through and set that up and make sure it's all correct. So right now you can see that where it has the WAN, it says it's IGB0, which is that card that I've got inserted. And here you can see the LAN it's saying is IGB1, and that's the address it's assigned to that particular interface. I don't have that even connected to my internet yet, or to my network yet, that interface. So it's just picking that one randomly and assuming that IGB0 is going to be the WAN. I want to change that. So we're going to do option 1, which is assign interfaces. And then it's going to come up and it's going to show you the interfaces. It's going to ask you which interface do you want. And it's asking about VLANs. So again, this is where I said you can do this later. So I'm just going to say no, I don't want to do VLANs right now. And then here in the parenthesis down here, right at the very bottom, it's kind of hard to see, I know, but you'll see it gives me a list of the different interfaces, and it's asking which one do I want to have as my WAN interface. So in my case, I want BGE0. Now you can always try A to see if it'll auto-detect it, but I know I want BGE0. I'm going to hit enter. And then it wants to know what I want to use as the LAN interface. So IGB0, IGB1, IGB2, it doesn't matter as long as you know which one you want, just type it in. I'm going to do IGB0 because I know that's at least one end of that card or the other. Now, I don't know which end it is, so I may have to move the network port to kind of see which one actually gets me the connection I want. But that's easy to do. Now, if you have 40 NICs, that's a little bit harder. You might want to know what they are beforehand. But IGB0 should be fine. So here it wants to know about if you want to set up opt1, opt2, and so on the other NICs that you have. I don't, so here you can just hit enter and it'll exit out of this particular setup. And it's going to show you what you're setting. It's just going to confirm that. And so just enter Y for yes. And it'll go through and make those changes real quick, and then it should bring you back to the menu when that's complete. This is really the only part that you need a monitor for. Everything else after this is really done through a web interface. So once you've done that part and you feel good about it, if you don't have anything else you need to do on this particular screen, if you want to set up IP addresses for these network devices that are different, then you would want to do that here potentially. You can do that with with other options there. You can reboot the system and so on, but really once this is done, you're pretty much done. You can disconnect the monitor if you don't need to use it anymore. You don't need a keyboard attached, anything like that. Just basically have this connected to power and then your network cards in the right order, and you're ready to go. So we're going to switch over to the GUI here on the web interface, and we'll be back. All right, now that we're trying to get back onto the GUI, what I've done is I've come in and I've basically turned off my network because I disconnected my regular network cable from this machine, and I connected the one from my pfSense box there. And again, as I said, I wasn't sure which end of that straight NIC of the 4 NICs was the LAN. So I plugged it in and I basically just turned it off and then turned it back on. And if it was on the right one, it would have connected very quickly. And if you hit the settings here, you'll see there's no information about any IP addresses, which means it's not getting an IP address from the pfSense box. So I know I've got the wrong one connected. So all I need to do is go over and I'm going to switch that port real quick, and we'll come back and try again. All right, I switched that network port, and I'm going to turn this back on. And you see it got connected very quickly, and if we click on the settings here, now you can do the same thing in Windows, just a different user interface to do it. But here you can see I've got 192.168.1.100, and this is my gateway and my default route. So usually this is going to tell you exactly what the IP address is, but it also said it on the screen of pfSense when we installed it, what the LAN address is for the gateway of that machine. And one of the things you really want to think about I'm going to close this while we're doing it. So when you first install pfSense, if you don't put in valid certificates, it's going to come up with this warning, but this is ours, it's on our network, and we know that, so we're just going to go ahead and say accept the risk. And then your original password and stuff is going to be admin and pfSense. So we're going to type pfSense, and we're going to hit sign in. Now you don't want to save that, but you'll see you get the welcome to pfSense, and it's going to start a wizard. Now one of the things you want to keep in mind when you're starting to set up a new box like this. So with a firewall like this, and I don't want to save that right now. With a firewall like this, you don't want to have all of your IP addresses for your different servers you may be running on some different hardware to get changed. So currently I run my network on the 192.168.10.x subnet. And the reason that I do that is because I was running 192.168.7, and then I decided to set up Falcon Player Pi for my Christmas light show this year. And when I did it, I couldn't get connected, and I went and read the documentation. It says, oh, hey, it binds on this port and this address, and basically you can't have your main network on that address. So I had to move everything, which was a little bit painful. It was something I didn't really want to do, but I did want to do at the same time, so I went ahead and went through with it. But knowing now that I've got 192.168.10, I don't want to go through that again by replacing a piece of router hardware. So one of the things you want to do when you're setting up pfSense is make sure you set up your LAN to be giving out addresses in that space. And then you can go through and set up reserved ranges and all kinds of things like that to do that as well. You could set up a VLAN that was that space and then only assign those devices that need to be on that VLAN in that space. But there's so many different ways to do it, but it really is something where you want to plan ahead for that. Don't just go do this and then switch it over and go, oh my gosh, all my servers won't connect. I don't know where they're at, because they will connect. They just may not get the IP address that they've had on your other hardware. So just be aware of that. So when you come here, they're going to say, hey, just so you know, there is paid software. It's going to tell you this is a setup. So we're going to hit next. It's going to say, hey, would you like to get 24-hour support? And if you would, definitely check into it. If you're doing this for a company, pfSense is a professional company who makes the software open source and available to people to run for free. But if you're looking for help and for support for 24/7, they have that. That is how they sustain the open source side of their business as well, and that's how they pay their employees, and that's how they continue moving forward, and that's how they make such a great product like pfSense. So definitely, if you're an enterprise and you're looking for a way to kind of shore up some of your things, make it more secure, and at the same time cut costs, this is probably a great direction to look at and check out their pricing. So don't forget that there is a way to do that. So we're going to click next for now. And they want you to give this thing a host name and then a domain. So I always kind of just set it up as however I can, but pfSense makes sense to me. So I'm just going to leave that as the host name. And then I like myhome.local. So you can see I've typed this in before when I was practicing. And we'll just kind of move down. So primary DNS server, I'll just use for now. I will set up my Pi-hole eventually, but for now I'll just use the Cloudflare DNS server. And my secondary, I'll use not 192, 208.67.220.220. That is one of the OpenDNS servers, so I've kind of got two options there just in case anything happens. And we're going to say, so they have this thing that says, and I'll make this a little bit bigger on the screen. I apologize for that being so small. Override DNS, and this is checked, which says allow DNS servers to be overridden by DHCP, PPP, or WAN, or on the WAN. So I don't want that. I want it to use my DHCP servers. I don't want it to override those things, so I'm going to hit next. And then we have this thing that says what time server do you want to use, and then where is your time zone. So I know that I am I think I'm -6, but that's okay. We're going to go up here and find America, Chicago, and this is in alphabetical order, so just kind of scroll through it until you get to the one you need. But in my case, I'm in Central Time, which is America, Chicago. I'm almost there. I saw it. There it is right there. America, Chicago. Hit next. That'll just set up your time server for your pfSense firewall, which is great. DHCP is what I get from my ISP. So this is talking about the WAN interface. Now, if you have a non-DHCP static address, then you would want to change this to set the proper setting. Most likely it would be static or DHCP, but you might have PPPoE or you might have a PPTP address. PPTP is not very secure anymore. I would suggest probably not using that, but if your ISP does, you have no choice. What are you going to do? But in my case, DHCP is what I get, so I don't need to change that setting. And as you go through the stuff for the WAN, you can kind of check things out. If you want to give this a specific MAC address that you're trying to clone from something else, you can. I'm not going to do that. You can change the MTU if you need to. And these are settings that you should kind of know what you're doing before you mess with them. So I'm not going to go into the in-depth part of what these are. If you don't know what they are, just keep the defaults and don't even mess with it. Again, if you have static IP configuration, this would enable, and you would be expected to go ahead and put in that information as well. You should get that from your ISP if you have it. DHCP client information, so the DHCP host name. So this is something that it sends to your ISP whenever it's requesting a host, an IP address. Again, I don't have to send that, but if your ISP does expect that for some reason, then you want to put it here. So again, if you're doing PPPoE, then there's that setup. PPTP, there's that setup. Again, none of that's the stuff that I selected, so it's not needed and it's disabled. So the RFC 1918 networks and the Bogon networks are two settings that you may or may not want turned on. But this basically says block private networks from entering the WAN, which means if you have a 192.168 or 127. something or 10. something and it's a private IP address range, it's going to block you from entering through this WAN. So it's kind of up to you to leave this on or turn it off. And then block non-internet routed networks from entering via the WAN. Again, this is something where basically the internet routed stuff has to be able to enter through the WAN. So if you're blocking this, it can create issues depending on how you're trying to enter your own network. So you may or may not want to turn these on or off, but I would say it definitely behooves you to read and understand what these are, and then you can make that decision. So I'm going to turn these off for now. And then it says, what do you want for your LAN? Now we're to the LAN. So remember I said my LAN is 10. So I would normally change this and keep moving, but since I'm not switching out my hardware just yet, I'm going to go ahead and make this 12. So I want it to be 12.1. I don't like the 1.1. Everybody has that. It's just too easy to kind of get in and do stuff. So I'm going to make mine 12.1. We'll hit next. And then it wants an admin password. So I'm going to change the admin password here. And just make sure you type it the same both times. Hit next. And we're going to say don't update right now. And it's going to tell you, okay, everything looks good. We need to hit reload in order for these changes to take place. Now, I'm connected on the 1.1 address, so I'm going to have to go back and change that in just a minute. I'm going to give it a minute to reload, but in order for these changes to take effect and for me to do what I need to do, I'll probably have to reload the page because it's not going to come back on its own. You can kind of watch the little indicators in Chrome or in Firefox and stuff and see if it's loading back up like it should. But, you know, it doesn't take that long for these changes to take effect, so we need to be kind of careful about that. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say 12, and I'm going to hit the enter key to see if it'll load up. I'll probably have to go tell my network adapter to change IP addresses. There we go. We're going to get our warning again because we changed IP addresses, and we'll accept the risk, and I'll type in admin and my new password. Now you can make this a much stronger password than you should. Mine is 10 characters, but even more is better. So right here, they're going to tell you about the system. Just hit OK. And then thank you and OK. And now you're at your main screen. Now, you're basically set and ready to plug this into your modem and start browsing the internet. And this thing will start handing out IP addresses through DHCP. There's more to be done, and I want to go into that, but I want to go into it in another video because I feel like this video is getting a little bit long. We've gone through all the setup. I've shown you kind of through Proxmox, and then I've shown you even on the physical machine a little bit. And now I've shown you kind of going through the wizard to get things initially set up. So if you get this far, you can go plug this thing into your modem and start browsing. You're going to be set to browse. Now, if you're trying to pass things through your network and access things from outside to inside, there's definitely port forwarding and some other things that you want to set up and do. The good thing is pfSense has some really, really amazing guides out there and a lot of good information on how to do it. There's lots of videos on YouTube on how to do things on pfSense as well. One of the things I like is they've got some nice little charts here, CPU usage and things like that will update every so often to show you what's being used. They show you the status of your NICs as well. Now they've got this little Netgate service and support, so I'm not getting that, so I can remove this one. So if I just click the little X, it goes away and you see my interfaces pop up. And then here I can hit the little minus and it'll just collapse this for me if I don't want to see the system information. Or otherwise I can expand it and see the system information as well. So you've got a few things here. Now this is just your dashboard. So I'm going to hit the X there as well. I'm going to go here and it's going to show me the things that I can add to my dashboard. So I do want to help you add your dashboard real quick. I like to have mine set up in a certain way. So the traffic graphs, I like graphs because it shows you information about what's going on, and then you can just drag these things around and you can see now I've got my traffic graphs over here on the left and my interface status on the right. And then we hit the little save icon to save our dashboard setup. Don't forget to do that. And then you hit the plus again and add something else. So if you like statistics, they also have this one called interface statistics, and I do like those. So I'm just going to hit add on that. And it's going to add those here, and you'll see the interface statistics come up pretty easily. And again, we you know, if you need to save the change, you can. If you want to put this below that, you can. And you see the little save pops up when you do that. So it kind of saves it when you add it, but if you move it around, then it wants you to save that layout. And it'll pop up with your statistics, so you can see some information. And here you've got your bandwidth graphs to kind of see what's going on. And there's some pretty good stuff here. So depending on what you're using, you may want to add things as you go. So like dynamic DNS, if you set up dynamic DNS on your pfSense firewall, then you may want to add that so you can see the status of it at the time. If you want to see what installed packages you have, you can add that as well. Netgate services and support we just got rid of, but then there's RSS feeds. There's thermal sensors if you have thermal sensors that you're using on the system. You have IPsec information, system information. You can put a picture on there. You'll have service status, OpenVPN. If you're using OpenVPN, you can set that up so you can see the status of OpenVPN as well and what clients are connected to it. You can check out gateway information, interface information, and then if you have captive portal set up, you can add that as well. I'm not going to set any of those up. I think we're good on the dashboard settings here, so I'm just going to close that down, and we should be set and ready to go. So this is really pfSense. It's very simple, very clean, nothing hard about it. And then finally you have the help area where you can go get documentation and so forth, just like you would always have in most systems. But as I said, we've really kind of got the system set up and it's ready to be used. Just kind of get out there and try it out, check it out, see what you think about it. If you're not ready to switch out your hardware yet, I understand. So do what I did, just set up an IP range that's not the same as your local network, and you don't have to worry about collisions and things like that. And you're really kind of ready to go. If you've enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.